mosquitoes, and mud. But they are so much more. Mangroves are one of the most important habitats on Earth for safeguarding the well-being of humans. Not to mention being vital to many of the planet's most extraordinary, wonderful, and endangered species. Everything from shorebirds to sharks and monkeys to manatees. Once we explore this unique landscape, it's not just wildlife, but us who are drawn to the magic of mangroves. In the dense, dark, intimidating tangle of a mangrove, a killer is on the move. This is a Burmese python, a formidable reptile. One of the longest snakes on Earth. Seven meters of muscle. Expert in climbing and swimming, and able to stay submerged for up to 30 minutes. It's very much at home in native mangrove forest. But this isn't Burma. Thanks to the exotic pet trade and some careless or thoughtless owners, this snake is on the other side of the world from its home. These are the Florida Everglades. But since the 1970s, pythons have set up shop here. It's warm and wet, a home from home. Ideal habitat that's packed with food. A multitude of species that have never met a python before and have no adaptations to deal with such a predator. Small furry mammals like the raccoon have declined by 99%. And foxes and rabbits have all but gone thanks to this exotic invasion. There might be 150,000 or more pythons in the Everglades, munching their way through everything from birds to deer and even alligators. They're having a massive impact on the entire ecosystem, a reminder of how finely balanced nature is. The giant snakes have knocked this ecosystem out of kilter. And some ecosystems are more important than others. Though Mangroves are found in more than 100 countries across the tropical and subtropical regions of the world. They cover just 137,000 square kilometers, about the size of Greece. And yet, as we'll see, perhaps more than any other landscape, they're vital to human health, as well as a unique animal and plant community. Here, plant life from land dips its toes in the water, creating a magical in-between place that has massive benefits for the surrounding ocean and the habitats inland. Mangroves are among the most productive and complex ecosystems on Earth. They're comprised of a unique family of trees, about 60 species in all. United by incredible adaptations to their surroundings. They all have networks of roots that spread out to anchor them in the soft sediment of the coast, and aerial roots that can rise above the soggy ground to absorb oxygen. And special salt glands in their leaves, which can extract and expel the salt taken in from the seawater. The biggest area of mangrove on Earth is along the coastline of Indonesia. A lush coastal forest area twice the size of Jamaica, and home to one of the most bizarre faces on the planet. Female and young proboscis monkeys look a little odd. But it's the male, with his fist-sized schnoz, that draws the eye. The primates live in small family groups, with one adult male. Therein lies the key to his distinctive profile. Apparently, for proboscis monkeys, size does matter. The bigger his nose, the more girlfriends a monkey is likely to have. The supersized snout not only has visual appeal, but also amplifies his voice. The bigger his nose, the better his barking. The quality of the sound warns other males in the area that are big boys in residence, and seems to be a major turn-on for the females. This troop lives high in the canopy of the mangroves, but makes a daily downhill migration. Mangroves undergo radical changes during the day, as the tide rises and falls. With the water levels lower, the monkeys descend. The male stands guard as his dozen lady friends and their young make their way down. He brings up the rear. They are totally suited to life in the trees and hardly ever go to the ground. All they're after are the lower branches that can be out of reach at high tide. There are plenty of mangrove leaves here for them to eat. But even the freshest young shoots they gather are tough to digest, which is why proboscis monkeys are unlikely to win bathing suit competitions. Their rather portly stomachs are basically big fermentation chambers to break down the tough foliage. They waste no time in binging before the tide turns. Proboscis monkeys are good swimmers. They even have partially webbed feet, but they still prefer to avoid the deeper water below the trees. You never know what might be lurking there. Crocodiles have learned to wait under the monkey's favorite feeding spots. And the crocs of Australasia are the biggest in the world. Saltwater crocodiles. The great reptiles get their name because they can tolerate seawater and move freely between rivers and the coast. The mangrove in between is an excellent place to hunt. Ambush predators. They try to get as close as possible, ready to launch their attack. A large family means many eyes to spot danger. But this time, the alarm call came too late. The rest of the troop watches in horror from a safe height. Time to go. They need some downtime after breakfast anyway, to let their big, bloated bellies do their thing. The rise and fall of the tide can transform coastal mangroves. Asian mangroves, like these in Japan, can see big shifts in water level. As the tide retreats, tiny armies march into action. Soldier crab maneuvers have military precision as they invade the mud. Moving in squads, they're less likely to be picked off by predators. With safety in numbers, they scan the sand, snatching up any edible detritus left by the sea. Fiddler crabs, on the other hand, don't like company. They prefer to dine alone. But space on the mudflats is in short supply. With a single enlarged claw, they beckon, like traffic wardens giving directions for the neighbors to back up. Anyone ignoring the message might resort to an arm wrestle to settle the score. The beach cleanup crew don't have time to argue. In just a few short hours, the tide seeps back into the mangroves, and the crabs must return to the mud. The reason the crabs have adopted this lifestyle is because the mud beneath the mangroves offers a good living, with food both washed out from the land and washed in from the sea. But they make sure they're safely tucked away ahead of the returning tide, because it's not only food that the sea can bring in. Lemon sharks, this time cruising in the waters of Florida's mangroves. The deeper water allowing them to get right in under the trees. They forage by nuzzling under rocks, looking for shellfish. Horseshoe crabs draw their eye. But they're too big. These sharks are tiddlers, baby sharks using the mangrove as daycare. Sharks don't look after their babies, but their mother was careful to give birth in the mangroves, so that from the word go, the pups could take shelter in the tangle of roots. As sharks go, they're pretty cute and friendly, and have allowed researchers to study them closely, revealing that they have individual personalities, make friends with each other, and can even be taught tricks. They'll hang out here, learning the ropes until they're 10 to 15 years old, big enough to head offshore and stand up for themselves. Sharks are not the only fish to cash in on the protective root systems of mangroves. Warm and sheltered, the waters are ideal places for young life. The roots make fantastic playpens for a myriad of baby fish. Some fish species spawn in the mangroves, laying eggs so the young hatch here, while others spawn at sea, but their planktonic babies know to make their way here for safety. Many commercially important marine fish begin their days here in the mangroves. And the colorful fish life on coral reefs, so loved by human divers, is dependent on the mangroves for child rearing as well. Coral reefs that are close to mangroves have 25% more fish on them than those that are not. That's the quality of childcare the forests offer, sheltering and feeding the little ones and keeping them out of the reach of the bigger predators of open water. But there are hunters that have learned to cash in. A lava heron uses the aerial roots as a handrail to lower itself carefully into place. It's a spear fisherman. But here in the mangroves of the Galapagos Islands, it's got competition. These fish face attack from both above and below the surface. In both cases, from birds. Galapagos penguins. The birds are critically endangered and depend on the rich pickings in the mangroves. Small and maneuverable torpedoes in tuxedos. They can dash in around the tree roots. The fleeing fish reward the heron's patience as well. Despite the occasional avian invasion, mangroves remain a safe haven for many. Green turtles are long-distance travelers. After months of ocean-crossing journeys, many seek the chance to rest and warm up, preparing themselves for the breeding season. The mangrove trees absorb the impact of waves on the coastal side, but further into the forest, create lagoons where the water is still and safe. Shallow and protected, the water is warmed by the sun. A hot bath for chilly turtles. These warm water spas are a vital stop-off for many marine species, especially important here in the Florida Everglades. Manatees are 3-meter-long gentle giants, the only vegetarian marine mammals. They have to munch through 10% of their body weight every day. And the mangroves supply a smorgasbord. But it's more important than just a snack bar. Truly marine, manatees can roam out to sea, ranging from the north coast of South America, across the Caribbean islands and Central America, and along the southern Atlantic coasts of the USA. But this marks the end of their habitat. The limiting factor: cold. During winter, North America's manatees can suffer from hypothermia if they don't seek warm water sanctuaries. As the salinity changes, barnacles and other pests acquired at sea fall off, and over time, algae grows. The mangrove fish are more than happy to give them a body wash. With solid bones as ballast, manatees can spend hours resting in the shallows, enjoying the warm. It's even more important to this mother, giving her a place to raise her young calf. In deep waters, it might be at risk of shark attack, but here it can safely follow her around and enjoy her rich milk. The mother will look after this little one for 2 years, safely in the mangrove's custody. It's not just marine creatures that depend on mangroves. Everything from monitor lizards to monkeys and even cassowaries. The huge flightless birds live in the tropical forests of Australasia and wade into the mangroves to look for fallen fruit. Their sensitive hearing picks up on every splash. And their eyes are drawn to bright, colorful objects, helping them locate the ripest fruits. The birds prefer to forage alone. Females might rendezvous with males briefly, but they don't stick around. Cassowaries are always raised in single-parent families, with a protective dad who shows them how to find their way around the mangroves. Many birds thrive in these unique forests. Ospreys are widespread and often feed and breed in mangroves. In many regions, they're migratory, but the warm, rich mangroves can provide for them year-round. Pairs often use the same nest year after year, adding branches with each use, building huge platforms. They're among the most accomplished fish catchers. Which is just as well. The appetite of their chicks is unending. The secretive, skulking, yellow-crowned night heron waits patiently for the tide to retreat. At first, the mudbanks look barren, but all it takes is a falling leaf, a knock on the door, home delivery. It's enough to tempt a blue land crab from its burrow. But the wary crustacean isn't going to give up without a fight. During the summer, fish can be concentrated in shrinking pools in the Everglades at the back of the mangrove, making them easy for white ibis to pick off. Pelicans don't mind hunting in the more open water on the front side of the forests. Scooping with their big beaks to snag fish. Though they don't mind taking advantage of a visitor from the coast. Bottlenose dolphins frequent the edge of the mangrove, knowing the treasure trove of fish it attracts. They can work together to drive fish into tight balls and chase them into each other's mouths. They can even force them to the shore, trapping them against the bank. A pelican can make sure it's in the right place at the right time. Mangroves don't just provide food, but safe nesting places for birds. Different species cram close together. They are safer in a busy community with many pairs of eyes to spot danger. Though the best spots are in short supply, so neighborly disputes compete with the racket from chicks begging for food. Though they live together, each of the birds has its own niche, so they might compete for space, but not food. The lightning-fast dagger beaks of egrets and herons snatch small fish. Woodstalks go for larger fish. The biggest birds, lords of the colony, they tend to snatch the best spots high up in the branches. It's mostly the male birds that build the meter-wide nests. Both parents brood eggs and young. The chicks are never alone for their first 3 weeks of life. White ibis tweeze smaller prey with delicate jaws, their scarlet heads contrasting with their snow-white feathers. Though it's the rosy spoonbills who steal the show. A lot of the stunning pink comes from their food, like the rosy tones of flamingos. The spoonbill enables it to sift little shrimps and other invertebrates that are abundant in the waters of the mangrove. The broad spoon is covered in tiny receptors that can detect the movement of prey that would be impossible to see in mud and murky water. All of the birds tirelessly ferry food to their hungry young, creating an endlessly moving, noisy throng. By building their colonies in trees overhanging waterways, they're out of the reach of land predators and the creatures of the water. Mostly. There's one hunter here that has developed a rather clever skill. Alligators are rare in the mangroves. Unlike all other crocodiles, they lack salt glands, and so only occasionally come into the brackish water. But this one's brought a tool. Everglades alligators have been observed waiting patiently with sticks on their heads under the bird colonies. It's bait. The gator can simply wait for an egret to spot the stick. Perfect for completing its nest. The creatures of this unique landscape exhibit skills and adaptations as special as the mangroves themselves. Just as mangrove bridges the gap between water and land, so does one of its liveliest inhabitants. Fish with lofty ambitions. Like our ancestors that crawled from the water nearly 400 million years ago, here are fish that prefer to feel terra firma beneath their feet, or at least beneath their fins. Mud skippers. Several dozen species of these specialist gobies make a living in mangroves, seeking the best of both worlds. Humans take a mouthful of air before diving into water. Mud skippers do the opposite. A mouthful of water that will sit in their gills, a mini oxygen tank allowing them to breathe. They're actually happier out of the water than in it, but must find puddles from time to time to dunk their gills. Strong fins enable crawling and even some impressive hops, helping them to navigate the mud. During high tide, they hide in their burrows on the seabed, safe from marine predators. But when the water retreats, they rule the beaches, marching across the mud to nibble on algae and invertebrates the sea left behind. They're not the friendliest fish, each ready and willing to defend its patch, flying their flags, ready to wage war. Fights can't go on for too long, because sooner or later the water will seep back in, and the free-roaming fish of the land will need to hide away. Mangroves have some of the most diverse animal communities on the planet. They have virtually everything, even their own deer. The key deer of the Everglades is a miniature version of a white-tailed deer, more familiar across the United States. Thousands of years ago, a small population of deer were cut off by the rising sea levels and evolved in isolation. Land bridges reformed along the Florida Peninsula, rejoining the mainland. But the little dog-sized deer remained unique. They only live on the little islands of the Florida Keys and have many adaptations to their unusual lives. They are excellent swimmers. Useful for a bit of island hopping. They love to eat the mangrove leaves and can even tolerate the odd sip of salt water. But despite their adaptations, the key deer is endangered. In the 1950s, only about 25 deer remained. They became one of the first animals ever protected by the Endangered Species Act. But even today, hunting, human disturbance, and loss of habitat keep the deer's population down below 1,000 individuals. The deer remain vulnerable, and so do mangroves themselves. Threats include dredging, filling in, pollution from farming, increasing boat traffic, and the development for waterfront homes. When mangroves are destroyed, they release a lot of carbon dioxide. This adds to the impact of greenhouse gases, changing global climate conditions. Mangrove destruction is madness. Mangroves are vital, not just to the animals that live in them, but to human populations all over the world. During major storm events, like hurricanes and tsunamis, that are ever more severe thanks to climate change, they have proven to directly prevent billions of dollars of flood damage and have protected millions of human lives. Their dense tangles of branches along the coast take the power out of storm surges and absorb the impact of waves. They stop coastal erosion, and thanks to their roots that bind and collect silt, they can actually build up and repair the coast. Their roots filter out nitrates, phosphates, and other pollutants, improving water quality. The plants capture huge amounts of carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases from the air and lock them into their carbon-rich soils for millennia. Therefore, they're critically important in climate stabilization. Probably more so than rainforests. In some regions, they're 4 times more effective in removing carbon than jungles. The mangroves also create nurseries for wildlife, including many species of fish that are vital to fishing economies and that feed local communities. especially in countries with mangroves, where half of the fish harvest is dependent on the forest. They also provide livelihoods. The timber from mangrove trees is water resistant, ideal for houses, boats, pilings and furniture. It's also burnt for fuel and used to make charcoal. Tannins for making leather and dyes can be extracted from its bark. The leaves are used to make teas, medicines, livestock feed, and a tobacco substitute. And that's not to mention the good they do us by creating green spaces. Where we can go snorkeling, kayaking, paddleboarding, and get some free relaxation therapy from nature. "35% of the world's mangroves have been lost in the past 40 years. And still, 1% is lost every year. 1 in 6 mangrove species is threatened with extinction. Without them, coasts are barren. The productivity held there by mangrove roots is washed away. Fisheries collapse. Water becomes polluted. And communities are vulnerable to storm damage and flooding. With sea levels rising, more than 1 billion people in lowland areas are at risk. It's thought mangroves could provide $1 trillion worth of sea defense if properly managed and protected. Mangroves have an estimated value to a nation of $30,000 to $60,000 per hectare. Surely worth protecting. But if current trends continue, they'll be gone by the end of the century. We need this beautiful bioshield. It's much more effective than any human-built sea defense, and does so much more besides. Given a chance, mangroves grow fast and spread like weeds. They can rebuild even around cities and protect us. Their rich animal communities can thrive, and we'll be able to enjoy the benefits and the magic of mangroves for many years to come.